I'll try to keep it a bit shorter. Okay, so inclusive collection management. I think this term was invented in collaboration with Reinhard in a desperate moment at the conference in Paris, where we had a workshop. Anyway, and we decided to have a new presentation. And anyway, this term was coined that day to talk about what I'm going to explain now, which is something that I think, especially Øyvind and myself coming from Norway, this is a very sort of almost like a natural approach to how you run a small organization. You are very inclusive. You allow junior staff to do a lot of things, make mistakes. You include them in your organization, but in some cultures, it's less so. It might be more strict. People are controlled more. So what I'm trying to explain in these slides is what is inclusive collection management and what have we done in IRIS to make that possible. So, as I mentioned earlier, for those who followed our presentation earlier this morning, this is a classic scenario in many gardens, as Reinhard also pointed out. You have the record keeper, or whoever he is, he has the role of record, or she, keeping track of the records, and that can be a lonely affair. You can sit there and on your own, in your little room, or big room, but on your own. And I'm using, this was a slide we made for the French audience. So it could be a very sad story. This is a hamburger, if those of you...
That's a sad
you sit there on your own. It's a bit like cooking for yourself. No offense to the Swedish audience. You know how it is to cook a dinner as well. It is time consuming. So there's not, on your own you can't do much. There's a limit how much you can achieve on your own. That's what this is trying to tell you. You might be a good chef. You might be produce something slightly better than this. But anyway, so what we're thinking of in IRIS is not so much to produce a hamburger, but to produce a feast of where everybody wants to enjoy the product of the labor involved in collection management. So how do we do that? Well, so why do we bother? What's the point? Why can't we just keep that the records as they are on a spreadsheet in a room up in some cupboard? So to include people in the process of managing your collection, you will increase efficiency. That's sort of given. Some people might argue that. We can take that in the break if you want to argue that. But provided the tools help you, I'm confident. I'm confident that this will improve efficiency in general. It also improves quality. If the gardener has been out there and moved a plant, and he writes on a note and hands it over to someone else, and then comes eventually to the record keeper, and he can hardly read what it says, etc. First of all, it takes a lot of effort. The quality, was it bed 4 or bed 14? All those kind of things. So if the gardener could actually do it himself very easily, then you've cut time and you increase quality. That's what we're talking about, really. And costs, eventually also, the cost of keeping all this information up to date will go down if you manage to do this in a sensible way. There might be more points here. These are the points I wrote down this morning, or yesterday. So that's some of the whys. If you run a bakery, you typically have someone either can't spell, or someone wrote something wrong on a note, or they celebrated someone running a garden. I don't know, but anyway, this can happen in your plant collection. If you don't look after things properly. So here in this case, the person who ordered the cake should have probably done it himself. I don't know. So, and now how can we do this in IRIS? So first of all, most of you, that IRIS has access control built in. so you can grant access to different staff. They can have different access. One example I like a lot is the photographer who is only allowed to add images and nothing else. You know, it's a very, you know, a lot of people, a lot of gardens have good photographers or volunteers who can take decent photos. Now with Iris you can then make sure that this person, you know, the one basic rule, make sure you note down the accession number when you're taking pictures. If you do that, you can then delegate that job entirely to the photographer, and then you can focus on other things. That's a sort of example of how you can apply access control. And of course there's much more than that. Traceability, you know, most of you, that down in the right corner you can see who made the changes. That helps as a sort of preventive. You know, when you press save, you know that you will rubber stamp your efforts. So people can come back and ask, why did you do that? So you can also in Iris search for things. Search for data that was changed by a user the last week. You know, not as a sort of a surveillance system, but more if you have new staff coming in and you think, okay, instead of me sitting on this desk every day, you can say, let's get back to you after a few days and see what you've done. So you search for the accessions that the person has changed and look through them. So very handy way to include people and follow up by using the tool. Usability, you know, even and myself as well, and feedback from you, making Iris as easy as possible to use is important. If people don't understand how it can be used, you can't delegate anyway. So it's you know, what we would constantly work on. Mobility with the handheld support, etc. And also with cloud database, you know, means that you can actually, for those who have that, you can technically use Iris wherever you have internet access. Validation, there's a lot of effort going into it to make sure that you put in correct data. We can't control absolutely everything, but you know, but the dates are sound. We have transferred, I don't know how many databases even you worked on, but it's like 30, 40, 50. Transferred all data from other systems, and we've seen how the consequences of bad validation. Everybody makes mistakes, everybody. And if there's no checks, the mistakes just quadruple. And it's, you know, eventually you can't run any decent reports. So this is important also when you delegate. If you have people with dyslexia or something, you saw this morning with IPNI control and web search, there are tools to help you to alleviate those kind of problems. Automatic logging, we have that where you know, in the plant history, for example, you know, the plant history grows, so that will help you to, and interoperability. I will spend a few more minutes on that because it's a difficult word, and you will understand what I mean with inclusive collection management when I come for the next slide. And that goes also with sharing your data. You could say you turn the table and with publishing your plant collection online, your data suddenly gets a second value. When you start recording an accession, you know this will go online. You have a different attitude, I think, to when you're sitting in your little cupboard and you know that you're the only one who will ever see this. It's a very different kind of mindset, and so very important part of the whole sort of value flow of the work you do with your plant records. I wanted to go a bit more detail about how Iris can share and what should I say, integrate with other systems. Well, we know now already that all the people can log in and can provide data and use data in the garden. We have, of course, the Garden Explorer, which a lot of you have already online, so you know about that, and the examinem. There is Facebook and Twitter, so people can, we don't have any numbers on that, but people can share that experience beyond the Garden Explorer. A lot of data formats supported to push data out to all kinds of things. Once this KML format, I'll mention it later, but it's one of those things that people may not know the potential of. And of course, the standards in the community, we try to comply to them as well as possible. And we can import data, as you all know, or most of you. And then finally, we also have integration available for a couple of platforms. That's not a platform as such, but I will talk about that at the end of the day. Smithsonian institution integration. ArcGIS will also be mentioned. But Iris is quite, we try to make it as open as possible so that you can plug in and share data with the different channels. And so, with Iris and the single record keeper, with all the features, we think that you will eventually be able to get there with your team of a big restaurant. Who's the head chef? I don't know, curator maybe. And you see, when you want to perform that, you need the staff. You can't just do it on your own. Or you can go back to your hamburger, or if you're vegetarian, I don't know, a small salad. But so that's what I think collection or inclusive collection management is all about.